And now, Spotlight Montana with Laurel Staples.
It's a journey from the dirt streets of Belize to the Olympic Games twice. And now, as the Tokyo Summer Olympics get underway, Montana track and field sprint coach Paul Renaud shares with us his Olympic experiences and explains how he's helping young Montanans accomplish their athletic goals in this Spotlight Montana. So during your childhood, that's when you discovered your athletic abilities.
Yeah, I used to run all the time, right? I used to run. Here's one of the other athletic abilities that most people probably would never know. I used to walk on my hands all the time, right? I get to the corner of my block and I walk the rest of the way home on my hands. Of course, your strength to weight ratio when you're 10 years old is a little different from now, and so I started running and running against friends, and I'd always steal my dad's bike. My dad would come over. He was a police officer, and we didn't have cars, so police officers rode bikes. So I'd take his bike and go ride for hours and crash every once in a while. But I knew I was fast, right? Because we were always challenging each other in the neighborhood to run, right? And then every once in a while I get brave enough and challenge one of my age group buddies' older brother. And there are times when I came close to to beating them. So that's kind of how it started. And then I moved to the States, and I grew up playing soccer as well, and cricket. And so when I came to the States, soccer wasn't very big. And so I used to kick a basketball around in the gym, and my buddies used to say, "Come out and play football." I don't play football. I'm playing football, right? So kind of one thing led to another. I ran track in junior high school. One of the neatest things that I had in junior high school was I won the city championship in the 100 in LA. And I got to go to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to go to the Jesse Owens Arco Games, right? And so it was an all expense paid trip by this Jesse Owens Foundation. And so I got to ride on a big old double-decker airplane, and I ended up second in the 100 at the Jesse Owens Arco Games. And the neatest things was Jesse Owens handed out the trophies that we received on the podium.
What was that like for you?
I followed track and field. But in the 9th grade, it was a big thing, and I knew it was a big thing. Not as much as I know today, right? Not as much as I know today, but I know I still have that trophy in one of my boxes that I've kept over the years. And we ran at Liberty Stadium, so the Liberty Bell is in the middle of the trophy, and it was pretty cool. It was very, very cool.
All right. So then at some point, tell me about your first appearance in the Olympics and how that came about.
So I go home to LA, which is where I was living at the time. And one of my great uncles, I don't see my family very often. So one of my great uncles, we were at some function, and he goes, they're looking for people to compete, for Belize. And I'm like, okay. He goes, no, I'm serious. They're looking for people, and you should contact them. And at the time, I had been going to school here at the University of Montana, and I was close to graduating. And so I decided to write him a letter. And it took him a while, and I also had my college coach at the time was Larry Heidebrecht here at the University of Montana, write me a letter of recommendation. And so we send this stuff off, and lo and behold, I got selected. We didn't have Olympic trials. There were only 12 athletes on the Olympic team. So I think we had 4 runners, and I think 4 cyclists, and I think some boxers. Plus, then we had the officials, our coaches, and the head person of our Olympic team. There were, I think, 15 of us that went to the Los Angeles Olympics, and yeah, that was big. It was big because I lived in Los Angeles for quite a while, and I hung out at the Coliseum. There's a park around there called Exposition Park. So I grew up in the junior high school, half a mile from USC, and here I am running on the biggest stage of my life, and I'm at the 1984 Olympics. Biggest piece for me was we walk out of the stadium, and there's 102,000 people in the LA Coliseum, and I kind of looked around like, holy moly, there are a lot of people here. Well, the crowd went crazy, but it wasn't for me. I got to run next to Carl Lewis in the 100 meters. I got to be on national TV because Carl Lewis was in that first heat on August 3rd in 1984. And I have no idea to this day how I ended up getting the lane draw. The top sprinters get the middle lanes, right? You're in the middle of things. And I was right next to Carl in lane 4. And yeah, that was quite the.
So tell me about that moment. What was it like during that event? And Carl Lewis right there.
Here's an interesting thing. That moment was like, holy moly. I'm a little older than Carl, and I saw him at a meet recently. And I said, so, we talked about that moment. And I asked him, I said, so Carl, what was your thought? And he's looked at me, he goes, first thing I thought of, man, was, holy crap. There are 102,000 people here that we're going to run against, right? Of course, we were focused, but your heart is going, just crazy. You're trying to calm yourself down, taking breaths. And I thought to myself, my family is going to get to see me. Yeah.
Your fondest memory coming away from that? I know it was one of, the big one, walking into that stadium. What else happened during this experience for you?
Meeting a lot of people that are just everyday people like you and I. Athletes are world-class athletes because they have a talent, they have a God-given talent, or they train with that God-given talent. But when you're sitting next to people, we're having a conversation just like that. I think one of the most fun pieces, and it continued at the Pan American Games in '87 that I went to, and then the '88 Olympics when I went in cycling. There's this camaraderie with trading pins, right? Your country gives you pins, and they actually have an area in the village where you can go and barter with other athletes, right? Your trade pins, and so I want one of those. Well, you're going to have to give me this one and this one. I had a little bag that someone made for me that I still have today that a bunch of pins are pinned on, right? And I met some really, really interesting individuals during the opening ceremony while we were waiting outside of the stadium to walk in. And you talk to these people. I think one of the goofiest memories I had is this family that I had here in Missoula gave me a book, right? It's a blank, like a notepad book. And they said, well, this is to get some autographs. I got one autograph, right? And they're just people, right? They're just people, and I didn't feel the need to do that. I feel from here, right? So interactions to me are, I will never forget. I don't need your signature. I don't need your fame. I don't need any of those things to be connected. So, those were probably some of my most, fond memories of just standing there talking to the world class high jumper or a world class weightlifter that has won an Olympic medal, and as friendly as you know you and I are right now. That's how it went.
Phenomenal experience. Well, then fast forwarding to the next Olympics, there was a big transition there for you in switching events.
Yeah, that was quite interesting because when I was growing up, bike racing was big in my country, but it was always cross country. They go and ride 100 miles and they come back and they sprint to the finish, and I was always on the side of the road when we had some big races. So when I came to school, I came here for football, and I ended up running track as well. And at some point during that 4 or 5 years, I started riding. I met a friend here in town, Carl Ammons, who kind of got me into riding. And so I don't road race. And so I never thought I would race bicycles, right? And Carl says, well, there's this thing called a velodrome, right? I'm like, what is what is that, right? And so I got some experience watching the velodrome when I went to the '84 Olympics, because it was in Carson, one of the tracks that I ended up training a lot on once I transitioned. And I was like, yeah, I want to do that. It's sprinting, it's fast, it's exciting. And so I decided after I graduate, Carl says, you need to go down to LA where you're moving. You need to find a coach and you need to start racing. Well, I did that. Not only that, but I found a sponsor, one of the bike shops out in San Luis, or no, it wasn't San Luis. It was Riverside.
And you were at
Riverside
this
Velo.
time still a student at the University of Montana.
Well, I had just graduated.
Okay.
That December of '84, and I was moving in February, and actually January of '85, back down to LA. My current wife, who we've been married for, will be 33 years this year, moved down with me, and so I found a coach, and I started racing in February of 1985, and I was racing every weekend, like sometimes Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We had a velodrome in San Diego. We had a velodrome in Encino. We had a velodrome in Carson at the Cal State Dominguez Hills. And so I would just go race. And you start out at the lowest level, and then you have to score points to be able to move to the next level. So in bicycle racing, you have a level 4 or 5, and then you get a level 3, and then level 2, and level 1.
You moved up fast.
Yes. So
Yeah.
within a 4-month period, I was riding against the level 1, 2 riders in the races, and so and this was kind of an unexpected piece. I didn't it didn't even dawn on me that it occurs, or it's an event. But the Pan American Games came up. This was in 1987, and it's just like the Olympic Games, except it's just North America, South America, the Caribbean, in Canada, and so I made the Pan American Games team in cycling. So the second sport, I made the Pan American Games, and I did pretty well, because that was 87, in the summer of 87, and I'd been racing 2.5 years. I ended up finishing ninth in the sprints, and I was just hooked. I was bike racing for about 15 years was my life, and so that's kind of was my. Then that got me to the Olympic Games.
Okay.
The following year, I ended up beating. Rory O'Reilly held the American record, and he might have held the world record in the kilometer, right, which is 1,000 meters. If you're on a big track like a running track, you go 2.5 laps around that at high speeds. And I beat him at the state championships in the sprints.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a big old thing on that was sent to Belize. Someone videoed all of it. So I was on national TV in Belize, and then came the 1988 Olympics. That was pretty amazing.
So talk about what it was like there during the Olympics and when you were racing. Kevin Levine, our sports director, mentioned to me about a gear change or something that came up with the gears.
Yeah, that was kind of weird. So the tracks that I've ridden on were all made out of either asphalt or cement, right? And I don't know if you're familiar with velodromes, but they're oval-shaped track with banked turns, right? And so the track in Korea, in Seoul, was made out of African teak wood. It was like your living room floor, right? It was smooth, it was fast. And so on a track bike, you have a single speed, right? So you don't have a gear shifter. Mm-hmm. You have a chain ring in the front, you have a little gear in the back that's connected to your wheel, and then your chain, right? You have a seat, your handlebars, your pedals, and you just kind of go. So to change a gear, I have to take off whatever it is, the gear that I need to take off, and I need to put on a different gear, right? Whether it's the chain ring in the front or whether it's a little cog in the back. And so I grabbed my bag. I pulled out what I thought was my time trial gear, because I race in a different gear than I do a time trial. The gears that I race in are usually smaller than my time trial gear. And so I put this gear on, right? And I go and I did my time trial, and I rode pretty fast, right? I rode really, really fast. And then I said to my coach, Coach, I spun out, right? I spun the gear out. I don't ever spin the gear out that I time trial on. And so we couldn't figure it out because we thought that I had put the right gear on. Well, we got to looking, and we ended up taking the gear off, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, okay, you did a boo-boo. You put the wrong chain ring on.
Okay.
Right? And so that's basically what happened. I ended up making sure I checked when I started racing. But what they do is they seed you by a time trial time. And so I finished probably in the middle third in time trial. Mm-hmm. Actually the lower third in time trial. So I ended up having to go against the top riders, right? The top riders, and there was a guy from Canada and a guy from the Czech Republic that I ended up racing against, and that was fun. That was fast. That was a fast race. I didn't I didn't come out of that one very good. I lost to both those guys, and so then what happens is there's this thing that's called a repechage, right? It's a French word for second chance. So if you lose, you get to go in a repechage. So all the winners advance to the next round, and all the losers get seated again in this repechage, right? And I ended up second in my rep heat, and didn't end up moving on to the second round of the sprints. But it was quite fast track. It was.
Well, your big takeaways from that Olympic experience?
It was, I had really never been outside the States. And so this is kind of a funny experience that I take away. So I wasn't a citizen of the United States at the time. I was a citizen of Belize. And because I'd never traveled outside the States, I had this, I took my driver's license, right, with me, but I didn't take my green card. So they let me out of the States. And when I go to the airport with my coach, they said, okay, let's see your ticket and whatever, and let's see your passport, okay, and let's see your green card. And I'm kind of looking at them going, why do you need my green card? Well, because your ticket says Los Angeles and your passport says Belize, right? So I got stuck in Korea an extra day because they had to I had to call my wife. We were 16 hours apart. And so it was like a midnight, and she was getting ready for work the day before, right? So, she had to get my green card. She had to get my green card number. And so I gave it to the immigration people there, and they had to check with Washington, D.C., and it came back that I was fine. And so they let me out of Korea. But when I got to L.A., and they told me this before I left, if you don't have your green card at the airport when you get there, we're not letting you out of the airport, right? And so that was the year I was supposed to get married, right? We got married in October.
Oh.
That was quite an experience.
Frustrating, stressful. Oh.
Right, yeah. Probably the biggest takeaway from the 1988 Olympics, and this is just kind of a weird piece. The fireworks at the end of the closing ceremony, everybody walk in kind of random. You don't walk in with your country anymore. If you have some people on your country that you want to hang out with, so everybody is all over the place, and the fireworks that the little rail around the inside of the track, the running track, had fireworks coming out of it. And the fireworks, and I have never seen fireworks like that, and I haven't seen fireworks like it ever. It was just, it was quite an amazing, and it's all it's all in my heart. It's all my memories that. So I keep track of those little things like my license and my number and my pins and all those things.
What thoughts go through your mind now as the Summer Olympics get underway?
I can look at the TV, and I can look at the things that are happening, like for instance the opening ceremony, and I can feel what it's like to be, down in that situation. And I can feel what it feels like to compete with this crazy crowd, behind you, and the other competitors that all kind of routines that they do, yeah, I get excited. The Olympic trials just recently, oh man, it was just like, wow. Um, it's a tough thing.
What was it like for your family to be on this journey with you?
Huh. Um, my wife was always there. We started dating shortly before I went to the '84 Olympics, and so my two sons didn't get to see me compete in the Olympics. But it was just one of those things that she has been on that journey with me. And I'm not, again, no one really knows. They hear these things about me and they kind of go, well, why didn't you say something? Why do I need to say, any of those things? It's a part of me, no different from anybody else growing up, wherever they grow up, and the things that they experience. I don't think it makes me any better of a person. It makes me appreciate who I am, more than I don't. I don't have to put on a show to like who I am, right? It's just and my wife knows that I don't go around going, yeah, check me out. I think it's been great. My kids, my younger son right now is starting to race bicycles, and you'll probably hear about him. He ran for me at the university, and you'll probably hear about him at some point.
All
He
right.
started racing this year, about the same age that I was when I started racing. But he's doing a different event.
His name is
Sterling Renault.
Oh, good. Okay, Sterling.
Yeah. My
Well,
two. I have two boys.
As a coach, how do you? One last question: with how do you the experiences that you have with the Olympics to your coaching?
I'm a person that I believe from my Olympic experience, what it did for me is it made me want to be the best at what I do in coaching. So I really believe in my coaching education. It's not like I'm winging anything. I read the science, I read the research. I've gone to coaching school, with the United States track and field. I have one of the highest levels in my credentials in track and field. And I think, to me, if I'm going to be the best that I can be, I need to have the knowledge and I need to have the experience. So I've actually been coaching for 25 years or so, since I moved back to Montana. Started at the junior high school level, went to the high school level, and now, I coach at the university level, and just self-determined to make sure that I have the education to go with what I tell my students.
Mm-hmm. You can watch the Tokyo Olympic Games right here on NBC Montana. On most days, your local news during the Olympics will be on from 5 to 6 p.m.